Hi, Kevin Coop here, and this is FaceTime with the Content Guy. I've been thinking a lot about this Damon study that we had on the site yesterday into how men shop, fitting them into archetypes and missions and things like that. And I think that kind of information is interesting and valuable. But I think it's also important to remember that perhaps more than ever, people don't fit into neat categories. They don't tend to go within boundaries. I think more than ever, it's important to realize that the why is almost always more important than the who or the where or the what. The why is the most important thing. Let me give you a couple of examples from my own experience recently. So, Mrs. Content Guy and I have been considering the possibility of doing a refinancing on the house. So basically she took the lead on this, and she's doing the research and sending the emails and making the phone calls, and she finally narrowed it down to one company. And she was exchanging emails with them, and it really came down to things like points, because we're not going to be in this house very long. It's only going to be a few years from now that we're going to pick up stakes and move out west, hopefully to Portland, Oregon. So we're just trying to figure out the economics of it. And at the end of the day, when she figured out the economics of it, she said, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And we talked about it, we agreed, and she sent the guy an email and said, thanks, but no thanks. Well, earlier this week, I got a phone call from the guy. And he said, well, I got the email from your wife, but I realized that I had never talked to you. And I said, well, it's okay that you didn't talk to me. My wife is really, taking the lead on this thing. And his response was, but she's a teacher. Well, okay, forget about the fact that, okay, she may be a third grade teacher, but that doesn't mean that she only knows what third graders know. But in fact, long before she ever became a teacher, she was a stockbroker with Smith Barney. She was an investigator for the New York Stock Exchange, and she helped to begin the high net worth asset account at Citibank that once was called Focus and now is called Citigold. So I explained this to him, and he said, well, I didn't really mean that. I just meant that she was a teacher and hard to reach. But clearly that was not what he meant. He was kind of, figuring, okay, she's a teacher, she's a woman, I really need to talk to the man of the family. Just a really stupid thing to do. She knows a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do, and I've always said, listen, you know more about it than I do. Please take the lead on this stuff. I don't mind. I'm not threatened by that at all. Far from it. It was a really bad move on his part, and probably will color any dealings we ever have with him or his mortgage service again. Now, it was interesting that I was also in my bank branch the other day. I was having a conversation with the branch manager, who's new, and he's a young guy. And during the conversation, he was really surprised to find out that I do virtually all my banking online. I rarely write checks anymore. Almost everything's done online. He was really surprised about that, mostly because he's a young guy and I'm not anymore. And I said to him, I said, listen, you may be a digital native and I may be a digital immigrant. That doesn't mean I'm not trying to learn the lingo. And then again, it was a perfect case, and he wasn't being at all offensive about it. In fact, he was complimenting me about the fact that I'm an old guy who uses the internet. But you got to be careful not to try and fit people into really neat boxes, because we don't fit that way anymore. The same thing goes, earlier this week, my wife and I, we did something we'd never done before. We went and took a cooking class at Sur La Table. And we did it because my wife, who doesn't do a lot of cooking and really doesn't like to cook, she said, I kind of like to learn how to make a soup. So they happened to have a soup and stews class at the Sur La Table near us. So I registered us and said, let's go. We'll have a good time. And it was a really interesting evening. Although one of the things she learned from it, other than the right way to cut an onion, was that she really doesn't like to cook very much. I mean, she doesn't like to stir. I make risotto. The amount of time I can ask her to stir for me if I'm called away to do something else is like 2 or 3 minutes, and she gets really bored. But what's interesting was the teacher of the class said, she has a lot of couples come in. But without fail, it's interesting that in each of these couples, it's usually one or the other that is the chief cook in the family. It's very, very rarely a shared experience, and that kind of surprised me. I thought that was interesting. I would have thought that it was more, but it would have been more of a shared experience. So I learned something about that. Again, you don't categorize too much. Marketers would love it if people could fit into nice, neat packages. But today, because we have access to so much more information and so many more opportunities, increasingly I think people are not going to fit into neat packages. Again, As I said it before, the why is almost always going to be more important than the who, the where, and the what. Anyway, that's what's on my mind this Thursday morning, and as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.